Welcome to the South Bay Midweek Prayer and Bible Study. I know you're going to enjoy today's presentation. The live session is even better because we pray together at the beginning. Feel free to join us Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. You can find the link on our website. Now sit back and enjoy some spiritual refreshment.
What I'm wanting to discuss tonight is what the healthiest people eat. And the question comes up is, who are the healthiest people? And I'm not talking about individuals who have lived a long time, because there are a lot of those. We hear about them every day, especially when they die at the age of 99 or 100. But I'm talking about a population that has exceptionally good health. And so are there really healthy populations? And the answer is yes. It happens to be that the Seventh-day Adventists are the healthiest people in the world. And how do we measure health and who's the healthiest? Well, they have fewer acute illnesses, they have less chronic disease, they're physically fit, they're psychologically in balance, and all of these things combine to give us life expectancy that's longer. So life expectancy is probably one of the best measures of health. And what is the life expectancy of Seventh-day Adventists? And here you see results from the first Adventist Health Study, and it shows that, and this is looking at California males, and the Seventh-day Adventists are the blue bars, and the Californians are the red bars, and they are matched for occupation, city of residency, age, and many, many factors. And you can see that on the left-hand side that those who are 30 years old, Seventh-day Adventists have 51.9 more years, whereas Californians only have 42.7. So Seventh-day Adventists have a 9-year life expectancy gain at age 30. And if you look all the way at the other end, you can see even at age 80, Seventh-day Adventist men still are going to live 4.6 years longer than their California contemporaries. And to put this into perspective, if there was no cancer, life expectancy in the United States would be increased by 2 years. If everybody's cholesterol was normal, life expectancy would be expanded by about 6 months. And females have that advantage as well. And if this was just a phenomenon in the United States, you might question whether or not the study had been done carefully or not. But Seventh-day Adventists are the healthiest people in the Netherlands. They have a big advantage there. Seventh-day Adventists are the healthiest people in Norway. Seventh-day Adventists are the healthiest people in Poland. Seventh-day Adventists are the healthiest people in Japan. In Japan, Seventh-day Adventists have about half the heart disease of other people, and cancers are reduced about 45%. And so you can see that no matter where Seventh-day Adventists are studied, they are the healthiest people. Well, it turns out that some Seventh-day Adventists are healthier than others. And in the first study, they noticed that the vegetarian Seventh-day Adventist men had a 4-year life expectancy advantage over Seventh-day Adventist men that were not vegetarian. Now, these comparing Seventh-day Adventists with Seventh-day Adventists. And this was very interesting. And so when the Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 2 was started, they divided Seventh-day Adventists into 5 dietary categories. And so we're going to spend the rest of the lecture looking at these 5 dietary categories and what these people eat in each of these categories. Now, it turns out that the largest group of Seventh-day Adventists are non-vegetarians. They eat beef, they eat poultry, they eat fish, they eat dairy products. Now, they're still healthier than their contemporaries because they don't smoke by and large. They may exercise more, and they may not eat as much of these things as their contemporaries. Then there's a group that's a little mysterious to me called semi-vegetarians. And as you will see, these people do eat beef, poultry, fish, and dairy products, but they eat very little beef, poultry, or fish. And then there is a group comprising about 10% of Seventh-day Adventists who are pesco-vegetarians. They do not eat beef or poultry, but they do eat fish. They do eat dairy products. Then the next largest group after the non-vegetarians are the lacto-ovo-vegetarians. And these individuals do not eat red meat, poultry, or fish, but they do use dairy products and eggs. And then we have the smallest group of Seventh-day Adventists, 4.3%, who don't eat beef, poultry, fish, or dairy products and subsist primarily on a plant-based diet. And so the question is, if you have those categories of Seventh-day Adventists, does it make any difference? Does that affect their health in any way? The answer is yes. Do these diets do anything for these people? And so let's look at the same 5 diets and let's look at diabetes. And you can see that with each improvement in diet, there is a reduction in diabetes, so that the vegan Seventh-day Adventists have a reduction of almost 80% in terms of diabetes compared to non-vegetarian Seventh-day Adventists. And if we look at hypertension, high blood pressure, you can see that the vegan Seventh-day Adventists experience only they have a 75% reduction in the prevalence of high blood pressure among that population. And if we look at their distribution by weight, you can see that normal weight begins with a BMI of 25. And as a group, the average rate of the weight of the vegans is within normal limits. So the only group of Seventh-day Adventists that are normal weight are the vegan Seventh-day Adventists. So now that you see that there is a health advantage with each dietary group, let's take a look at what do these healthiest people eat. And so this is what we're going to look at in the rest of the program. We're going to start with a look at red meat. And as you might expect, all the rest of the slides will look kind of like this, with the vegans on the left and the non-vegetarians on the right. And you can see that the non-vegetarians get 16 grams a day, and you can see the semi-vegetarians really don't get very much red meat, and the pescos and the lacto-ovos and the vegans don't use red meat at all. What about poultry? Well, it's the same kind of picture. The semi-vegetarians have a little bit, but most of the poultry is consumed by the non-vegetarians. What about fish? Well, the daily average eating of fish is very interesting, isn't it? Because you can see that the pesco-vegetarians eat a lot of fish, and the non-vegetarians eat a lot of fish, but the semi-vegetarians don't eat much at all. And of course, the vegans and the lacto-ovo-vegetarians don't eat any fish at all. What about these plant-based meats that are becoming increasingly popular, and you can order them at fast food restaurants now. And they have Impossible burgers and not meats of one kind or another. And this is how that's distributed. Very interesting that the non-vegetarians don't eat it. Why don't they eat it? Because they eat real meat. And you can see that the vegans don't eat plant-based meat because it looks too much like meat, and they really don't need to eat it. But the lacto-ovo-vegetarians are the ones that eat a lot of these plant-based meats. What about dairy products? Well, you can see that the semi-vegetarians and non-vegetarians use the most dairy products, and the vegans, now vegans aren't supposed to have any dairy products at all, so they probably slip now and then. What about cheese? And this is interesting because cheese consumption is really pretty high among all of the groups except the vegans. And the lacto-ovo-vegetarians eat more cheese than the pesco-vegetarians. What about dairy desserts? And here we're talking about ice cream, we're talking about frozen yogurt, we're talking about sherbets. And you can see that the vegans don't eat frozen desserts, at least frozen desserts made out of dairy products. And the lacto-ovo-vegetarians eat more than the pesco-vegetarians, but they are outdone by semi-vegetarians, and non-vegetarians get their banana splits, I guess. What about real butter? Real butter is saturated fat, not recommended, in the diet, and you can see that that falls out pretty much that way among these Seventh-day Adventist dietary groups, with non-vegetarians eating the most butter and lacto-ovo vegetarians eating very much less, and the vegans not eating any at all. What about other solid fats? And here we would include margarines of one kind or another. And the use is fairly high, isn't it? Among all groups, including the vegans, have a moderate amount of use of that. What about liquid fats? And these are healthier for you because here you've got olive oil and you have canola oil, grapeseed oil, a variety of oils. And interestingly enough, the pesco-vegetarians and the vegans use oils to the greatest amount. And the lacto-ovos, the semi-vegetarians, non-vegetarians, all use them at about the same amount. What about refined grains? Now, refined grains end up in white bread and things like that. And refined grains are used mostly by the non-vegetarians. And then it tapers off down to the vegans who don't use much in the way of refined grains. What about whole grains? And here is what you might expect. The vegans use the largest amount of whole grains, and it's fairly level after that, except for the non-vegetarians that don't go in for whole grains very much. And so I think the lesson here is whole grains are better than refined grains. And I have thrown in just 2 or 3 slides having to do with disease. And here's colon polyps by total fiber in the diet. The more fiber you have, which you get from whole grains, the less polyps you have. Let's look at nuts and seeds. And look at this. Vegans eat the greatest amount of nuts and seeds, almost exactly twice the amount that non-vegetarians do. And of course, nuts and seeds are extremely healthy for you. They're high in monounsaturated fats, good source of fiber and protein. And let's look specifically now at tree nuts. And here, the vegans and the lacto-ovos eat more tree nuts than any other group. And the tree nuts are basically a little bit healthier for you than peanuts. And but peanuts are not really a true nut, they're a legume. And isn't it interesting that the vegans eat the least amount of peanuts? And the pesco-vegetarians and the non-vegetarians have the most peanuts. What about peanut butter? And there are good peanut butters, like the one in the middle there, Smucker's. It just has peanuts and a little salt. Some of the others are up to 50% Crisco, and it makes it smooth to spread, doesn't get hard, doesn't stick to the top of your mouth, because it doesn't have that much peanuts in it. Peanut butter. The lacto-ovo vegetarians eat the most peanut butter, followed by the vegans. And so they don't eat their peanuts, but they do eat their peanut butter. Now let's look at fruit and look at this. Vegans eat much more fruit than any other category. The pesco-vegetarians are doing very good with fruit as well. And let's look at some specific fruits. Let's look at citrus fruit. And you can see the vegans eat more citrus fruit, and the pesco-vegetarians come in second on that. What about berries? Berries are very high in anthocyanins, which help prevent cancer. And as you might expect, the vegans eat more berries than anybody else, almost twice as many as non-vegetarians. What about other fruits? And other fruits, vegans eat a lot of fruit, don't they? And the pesco-vegetarians. What about dried fruit? Dried fruit is very healthful for you, and it helps prevent cancer of the pancreas, cancer of the prostate in men. And look at this. Vegans eat the most dried fruit. And the lacto-ovo and pesco-vegetarians come in second there, with the least amount of dried fruit in your non-vegetarians. Let's look at vegetables as a class. And here you can see that the vegans, they got to eat something. And so they are obviously eating their fruits and vegetables. And the pesco-vegetarians eat more vegetables than the lacto-ovo-vegetarians. And here is overall mortality. I threw in one disease slide here to show that if you have vegetables 3 servings a day, your risk of dying is reduced by 25%. And so vegetables are extremely important in providing good health. So let's look at some specific groups. The cruciferous vegetables are high in sulforaphane, which is a potent anti-cancer compound that induces phase 2 enzymes in the liver. And look at that, the vegans and the pesco-vegetarians eat the most cruciferous vegetables. What about sweet potatoes? The vegans and pesco-vegetarians eat the most sweet potatoes. What about white potatoes? The vegans and lacto-ovo-vegetarians eat the most white potatoes. It's pretty level all the way across, isn't it? A lot of white potatoes. What about French fries? Ah, look at that. The non-vegetarians eat the most French fries, followed by the semi-vegetarians. But it looks like the lacto-ovo-vegetarians get their share of French fries as well. Let's look at legumes, very high in protein, and the vegans eat the most legumes. What about soybeans and tofu? Well, as you might expect, the vegans eat a lot of tofu and soybeans. Tomatoes? Vegans and lacto-ovo-vegetarians eat the most tomatoes. And I'm going to throw in one more disease slide here. Very important study. Adventists who eat, and in this study, the only vegetable that had any significance was tomatoes. And Adventist women who eat tomatoes 5 times a week had a 66% reduction in cancer of the ovary. So tomatoes are potent in that regard. Leafy green vegetables, vegans, everybody's doing pretty good with leafy green vegetables. Overall mortality with green salads is important as well. You get a 33% reduction in the risk of dying by having a green salad every day. And so green salads are important, but you got to be careful of the dressing. You don't want to put a lot of that on because, and look who uses the most salad dressings, the non-vegetarians pour it on, followed pretty closely by your lacto-ovo-vegetarians. Better to make your own with a little olive oil, a little lemon juice. Avocados, and the vegans eat almost 3 times as much in the way of avocados compared to Seventh-day Adventists who are non-vegetarians. How about candy? Look at that. The non-vegetarians eat the most candy, but the lacto-ovo-vegetarians eat some, and the vegans have a little candy now and then. How about snack foods? Pretzels, things like that. That's almost level all the way across. There's no significant difference between them. All Adventists enjoy snack foods. What about sugar-sweetened beverages? Non-vegetarians, semi-vegetarians drink the most sugar-sweetened beverages. What about sodas in particular? And the non-vegetarians drink the most soda, and the vegans drink the least amount of soda. What about fruit juices? Interesting. Pesco-vegetarians drink the most fruit juice, and the least fruit juice is consumed by vegans. And that's an important point because the value of fruit goes down the more you process it. So fruit juices don't carry near the health-providing benefits as the whole fruit does. And vegans evidently understand that. What about meal replacement drinks? Now, these are used primarily by people trying to lose weight, and you can buy them in a can or mix them up yourself. Vegans don't do it because most of them have a milk base to them, and but they're consumed pretty much by others. What about non-dairy milks? Almond milk, oat milk, those kinds of milks. And here you can see that the vegans consume the greatest amount of non-dairy milks. If we look specifically at soy milk, you can see that vegans drink the most soy milk. What about water? Plain water is very good for you. And it reduces your risk of a heart attack by 50% if you have more than 4 glasses a day, compared to those who drink less than a glass a day. And here you have vegans. They drink the most water. What about tea? And here you have a mixture of herbal teas plus other teas. And the pesco-vegetarians drink the most tea. Vegans drink a lot of tea, and I'm sure that comes out as herbal tea. What about alcohol? And the non-vegetarians drink the most alcohol among Seventh-day Adventists, but it's not very high. It ends up being 1.3, this is not grams per day, this is the percentage of that population that use alcohol on a daily basis. And so the non-vegetarians, only 1.3% drink alcohol daily. But interesting enough, 1/10% of vegans have some alcohol every day. What percentage never drink alcohol? And you can see that 98.8% of the vegans never drink alcohol, and 83.4% of the non-vegetarians never drink alcohol. Well, we've pretty well covered that scene. I don't see the coffee slides that are in there, but coffee is consumed by the most by the non-vegetarian Seventh-day Adventists, then it decreases down, and the vegans don't use any at all. Here's a quote that I thought was kind of interesting. It says, "Men and women indulge appetite at the expense of health and their powers of intellect, so they cannot appreciate the plan of salvation. It is impossible for them to have exalted views of God and to realize the claims of his law." And this is just really powerful, because what it's telling us is that if we are indulging our appetite, as apparently about half of Seventh-day Adventists do, the problem is it affects not only our health, as we saw it affects their health, but affects their powers of intellect, and they can't appreciate the plan of salvation. And if they can't appreciate this plan of salvation, they can't appropriate it to themselves. And it's impossible for them to have exalted views of God and to realize the claims of God's law. And so this thought is encapsulated in this closing text from 1 Corinthians 10:31, where Paul says, "Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." And so I think it's useful for us to review what Seventh-day Adventists eat and what the healthiest Seventh-day Adventists eat, and to try to move our eating patterns toward those. And from what I understand in talking to Gary Fraser and others involved with the health study, is that the longer a person is in the Seventh-day Adventist church, the more they shift toward the vegan side. And so church members, by and large, don't apostatize on their diet. They tend to improve on their diet. Now, of course, there are some that don't. They go the other way. But anyway, it's time for us all to start eating like the healthiest people do.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We hope you found today's presentation to be a blessing to you. And you know, it's never good to keep things to yourself. It's always best to share them. So find someone that you can share what you have been blessed with others. If you enjoyed today's presentation, let us know by hitting the like button, and subscribe to this channel if you want to know when there's new presentations coming out. God bless. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.